Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Nine to Never, the podcast by Zendrop, all about entrepreneurship, e-commerce, quitting your 9 to 5, and creating the career of your dreams online. My name is Kennedy, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at Zendrop and also the host of this podcast. Today's guest is someone that you might know and be very endeared by, Brad Loeffler, which is the COO of Zendrop. Brad has been with the company since its fruition and is a huge proponent of why the company has become so successful, and we are constantly growing every single day. He is basically the man with the mission who makes everything happen behind the scenes. Any fires that need to be put out, any SOPs that need to be created, any customer support inquiries, he's the guy for it. And I'm so excited to have him on the podcast today because we are talking about the behind the scenes of owning and running a business. We believe that this is something that's not talked about enough in terms of dropshipping and dropshipping resources. So we really want to make sure that we give you guys the time to understand the importance of not only creating structured and functional customer service, but also how to organize and optimize all of the millions of objectives that go into running a dropshipping business. Brad has been working in the e-commerce space for a long time now alongside our CEO, Jared Getz. So he is fully and more than qualified to discuss all of this information with you. So if you're ready to get a little bit real in terms of how to actually run an e-commerce business and what it means to fully scale based on these objectives, stick around and keep listening. Brad, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I know I talk to you every day already, but I'm excited to put you in the hot seat. So why don't you just introduce your story to our audience? I know a lot of people probably already know who you are and what you do for Zendrop, but give us some insight in terms of how you got into e-commerce in the first place.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. My name is Brad Loeffler. I'm the COO of Zendrop. And I got started in e-commerce roughly about 5 years ago. Got introduced through Jared, who's the CEO of Zendrop, and as a lot of you might know, and just kind of like got myself immersed by going through actually the training that he put together initially. So learned everything I know about Facebook ads initially through that, and then started doing some like digital marketing services in my local area for small businesses, like local businesses. It was so easy back then to literally just like throw up an ad and just have location-based targeting and get like $2 CPMs, and businesses were seeing way more impact from doing that than they were like doing local print ads or radio ads or whatever else they were doing. So was able to find a little bit of a side hustle doing that, a little bit of an income stream, and then really got involved with Jared building dropshipping stores a year or two after that, and came on board the team when it was very, very small, and managed a lot of dropshipping stores and sort of learned the ins and outs of the e-commerce world that way. Just got really hands-on with media buying, conversion rate optimization, email marketing, all the different sort of, that's not really my wheelhouse, but that's sort of how I got involved in the e-commerce space and in the dropshipping world.
Amazing. So you are the COO of Zendrop. You are the man that makes everything work cohesively in terms of behind the scenes. So I'm sure you found a lot of flaws or at least struggles that typical dropshippers have when they are doing these types of things for their own businesses. So when you and Jared were collaborating in terms of building Zendrop, what were the defining struggles that you saw a lot of dropshippers have that you now integrate into the business of Zendrop?
Yeah, well, the reason we built Zendrop in the first place is because there was a fulfillment solution that needed to be put into place for people to be able to run a sustainable dropshipping business. Really, it came down to the customers of dropshipping stores were having a bad experience, and your customers are your lifeline, right? They're what's keeping your business afloat. They're driving your revenue. If they're not happy, your business isn't going to work. So that's why we built Zendrop in the first place. But the actual experience of your customers is the most important thing that you can have any sort of control over.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second, because at Zendrop, we put a lot of emphasis in terms of customer experience. I think that you can also agree that the customers are the reason that we're here, which is why we put so much emphasis on making sure that they are happy. How do you see dropshippers succeeding in this part of their business? And where do you see dropshippers usually having the hardest time really handling customer support?
Yeah, I mean the customers are the most important part of any business, right?
Of
If you
course.
don't have if you don't have customers, you don't have a business, and if you don't have happy customers, you won't have a business for very long. So I think that the most impactful thing that someone can do with their customers is communicate with them. You have to have an open, transparent line of communication with your customers and be proactive. So the biggest thing you can do is manage your customers' expectations, right? There are some things that happen with Zendrop that are outside of our control, but we do everything we can in our power to communicate whatever we can communicate to our customers. And that's why if you go on Trustpilot or if you go on any of the other review sites, we have a really high trust score or a really high customer satisfaction ranking. Is because, look, sometimes things that aren't in your control happen, and obviously you can't control those things, but what you can control is how you communicate to your customers. So I think the most important thing that people can do is manage their customers' expectations, right? The only reason why in any scenario in life you would be upset or disappointed is if you had expectations that weren't met, right? So the only way to manage that is to control your customers' expectations. So if you know your shipping times are going to be 10 or 12 days, and you're selling to a lot of people in the US who might be used to the Amazon Prime 2 day shipping experience, you really need to do a good job of managing those expectations upfront. Having something in your shipping confirmation or order confirmation email that tells people the expected delivery date. Hey, this might take up to 2 weeks to arrive. Um, Things like that will really make a huge difference, especially now that Facebook, Shopify, all of the merchant processors are really catching on to these types of businesses. And there's nothing wrong with these types of businesses. What is quote unquote wrong about them is that people that own the businesses aren't doing a good job managing customers' expectations. And then you get a bunch of upset customers because of the mismanaged expectations. And then that winds up coming back to bite you when people leave a bad review on your Facebook page, your ad account gets shut down, people start filing chargebacks because their expectations aren't met. But if you can change their expectations and manage those, you'll find a lot more success.
So, obviously there's two sides of customer touch points, right? There's the public side, which is your web page, your homepage, your product pages, and then there's the side of actual communication individually through email or customer support or whatever mechanisms a business has. Where do you obviously we both believe that transparency should happen from the get-go, but for new drop shippers who are trying to create that transparency or honesty with their customers, where do they put that type of information on their website or on their public facing media?
Yeah, so right after someone buys something is the best time to grab their attention. They've just spent money with you, right? So they are clearly invested in what's going to happen next, right? And if you don't manage the expectation right then and there, they're going to think something that's outside of your control. They might have a preconception in their head of, I just ordered something off a website. Should take about to maybe at the most 5 days to get there. But there's a lot of businesses that it takes a little bit longer for something to get there. Like for example, I just ordered a couch. It took like 8 weeks, right? So if the company that I bought that couch from didn't tell me it was going to take 6 to 8 weeks to arrive, like day 5, I would have been like, where the hell is this couch? And I would have started to get upset and annoyed because my expectations are different from reality, right? So, but they right in the shipping confirmation email or the order confirmation email, sorry, I should say, they told me, hey, this product is going to take 6 to 8 weeks to get to you. And it even said that on the product page itself. So my expectations were completely in line with what was reality in that case from the very beginning.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the fine line between marketing and managing a customer's expectations. I think this is a really interesting dynamic here because obviously we're trying to sell things online amongst a bunch of other competitors who are probably selling the same products or similar products. And so you always hear in marketing, right? Why is your product better? And even though a customer still might purchase a product knowing upfront that it's a 10-day shipping time or what have you, how do we spin that narrative so that people are more likely to still want to purchase from you than that of Amazon or something that has the standard 2-day shipping times?
Yeah, again, not so much my wheelhouse. Like I'm much more of the process operations guy, and Jared
Yeah.
was much more the creative marketing guy. But I think you can do that with like really cool creatives, where it's like I'm cool with waiting 10 days to get this product because I can't find it anywhere else, and because the people in the ad looked like they're having so much fun using it, or it was so useful, or it's like that sort of like spin in the marketing department. I think can like that expectation of them getting that product and having so much fun with it or it being so useful can mitigate the wait times a little bit.
Definitely, definitely. And I think you can definitely, we're talking about what makes your product better than X, Y, or Z stores who sell the exact same thing. A narrative that you create about the product that allows for that customer to truly envision their life being exponentially better because of this one product is far outweighs the 10 days it takes for the product to get to you. So
Yeah, it's the perceived value, right? It's like
exactly.
this person can see themselves having so much fun with it, so it's like cool. I'll wait a little bit longer for it.
Exactly. So I want to switch gears and talk about irrational customers for a second, because this
Okay.
is something I've seen you be incredible at. Obviously, we can be upfront and transparent as possible with our online customers, and yet we're still having people who could potentially write slandering reviews because it was miscommunicated to them or something of the sort. And right off the top of my head, the first thing I can think of to mitigate these customers is here's free shipping or here's a free product. But what are other ways in your experience to really maintain the integrity of your business while also managing those irrational customers?
Yeah, so I think we could break it down into two separate sort of irrational customer,
Okay.
right? The irrational customer that leaves a public facing review needs to be dealt with in the same way, but slightly differently than someone who just comes in and is irrational, but isn't doing it in a public forum. So someone that does this publicly, like on one of your ads, or they leave a Facebook review, or they leave a review on your Shopify store, or wherever else that somebody else would see it. I think that needs to be handled slightly differently, just because your response is going to be viewed by potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands of other people, right? So you want to do that in a way that's really thorough and that addresses every one of the points in the review. And you want to do this if someone just messages you privately as well, but it's more important that you do this very thoroughly in a way that protects your business in a public setting. So, like, let's say someone left some sort of public review that was negative, right? And it was sort of irrational. It doesn't make much sense, but you still want to obviously address it in a very kind, very compassionate way and address every one of their points individually. So if someone mentions 3 or 4 things about the negative experience they had, you're going to want to touch on each of those 3 or 4 things individually and combat them, but do so in, like I said, a kind and compassionate way. So the beginning of it is always something like, hey, thank you so much for your feedback, or thank you so much for, because you do genuinely, or you should genuinely value this person's feedback. They're trying to give you, they're not happy, right? There's no other reason why they would leave this review. And you need to take the feedback seriously so you can improve and not get that negative review, hopefully in the future. So firstly, thank them for taking the time out of their day to leave you some feedback, because as entrepreneurs, as businesses, that's the most valuable thing that you can possibly get is customer feedback. Your customer feedback is how you improve your product, how you improve your customer's experience for your future customers. And it's the only way you can have a thriving business is if you take customer feedback and actually improve on the customer experience from them. So the first thing that I'll always do is thank you. Thank you for leaving this feedback, and then address each one of the points as they come. And in a public setting, you're trying to do that in a way that it makes it so that another person reading the reply from the review can deem this review as irrational, right? It's like what they're saying doesn't really make sense with the context that as the business owner or as the person working for the company. But the person reading that review that knows nothing about the company might not know that. So you want to add whatever additional context you can to that irrational review so that the person reading your reply can deem that review irrational, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. You're kind of giving the power to the remainder of your audience to decide for themselves where the expertise lies.
Yeah, you're trying to provide all the context and specific knowledge that so that someone else reading that reply says, "Oh, that makes sense. This is completely kind of an irrational person. I'll kind of disregard that review." And then the other piece to that is the person that isn't leaving this on a public forum. You really still want to do basically the same thing where you're adding in all that context. You want to do it in a thorough way. It just might be slightly different than someone that's leaving a public review. But this person that's leaving the review might also be likely is missing a lot of the context of why that it might be irrational. So providing as much context as you can, explaining as thoroughly as you can every single point that they address is really important. I think the biggest thing that I see people kind of miss when they're doing this kind of interaction with an irrational, angry customer is that this customer will address 3, 4, 5 different specific issues or points in their message, and someone will only respond to 1 or 2 of them. And so what that does is, that's one of the worst things you can do. What that does is it makes the other person feel like you didn't actually listen to what they were saying. And most of the time, that's kind of just what somebody wants. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. So you really have to listen to them, take their feedback in for what it is, and address every one of their points thoroughly so you can come to a resolution faster. And so that this person feels valued, because they should feel valued. They paid your business. They gave business to you, and you should take that feedback wholeheartedly. And so that's what I think that most people miss, is they'll kind of brush over it because it's uncomfortable to read. It's like a personal attack, right? So it's hard to read through the whole thing and respond to each point, but I think that's the most important part.
Okay, so this scenario is obviously one for which a customer is being irrational in terms of their expectations. But what if, as the business owner, you do actually mess up? You made some type of mistake that is negatively affecting a customer, and you're still getting negative feedback because of it. How can you gracefully and professionally handle that without affecting your business long term?
Yeah, it's a great question. Really interesting question. And something I also have a lot of experience with. I've messed up many times. I've made big mistakes, but the number one thing I've learned is that transparency is the key to developing that relationship and overcoming the mistake. So people make mistakes. Like it's going to happen. And someone is much more likely to understand if you own up to that mistake and offer some sort of, you can even offer some sort of compensation for it, or refund, a free membership, or something to show that you care, right? Just be transparent. Hey, this was our bad, right? Like, this was our mistake. Here's what we're willing to do to make up for it. And I'm going to make sure personally that it never happens again by implementing X, Y, and Z. Thank you so much for your feedback. Like, I think that's really the only way to do it, because if you try to lie and cover up your mistake, and people see right through that, it's not the right move. It's never the right move. And in any situation in life, I believe, but like, especially if you're dealing with a customer, You just got to be transparent. Hey, this is our mistake. I totally understand. Here's some compensation for it if you can offer something. And here's how we're never going to let this happen again.
And I think it's also important to touch on for a lot of new entrepreneurs. I know I've gone through this personally. Every mistake feels like you're ruining your business because you're so afraid of making mistakes when you're starting out, specifically with dropshipping. Even if you're only investing a small portion of what you can afford into your business, every mistake feels like you're ruining your life. And so I think it's important to touch on that even though there is a proper way of handling mistakes you make with customers, it still is one customer. One mistake with one customer is not going to tank your entire business, but you should put in those proper procedures early on. That way, when you do make more mistakes, because you will, you are not being personally attacked internally every single time you do something wrong.
Yeah, I say this all the time to the team here, especially our support team. It's like, it feels like a dagger, right? When you made a mistake and an angry customer comes in and they're rightfully so, they're angry and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And it's like, okay, let's fix this. So we don't turn one angry customer into 100 or one angry customer into 1,000. Let's make this right for this one angry customer, but let's learn from it. So let's put the systems in place so that it never happens again, or let's fix whatever's broken so we can prevent the one angry customer to not become 1,000, because no one wants anyone to be angry at them. And especially if you're just starting a business, it does feel like, you're right, it feels like one mistake is like, oh my God, like it's all going wrong. But if you can turn that into a learning to prevent future angry customers, it's a win. And another thing I'll say is, if you're a one-man operation or a one-woman operation, or you are someone who's just starting out, you might be answering all the support inquiries. It's kind of important to take a step back, because if you're handling customer support inquiries, like, look, I handled almost all of the customer support inquiries on Zendrop for the first 6 months. And when you are in that world, the only thing that's coming at you is negative things. I've answered tens of thousands of support tickets for Zendrop, and we might have had one or two that was like, "Hey, you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up." Like, no one is contacting the customer support desk to tell you how great you're doing. So just realize, if you're doing that it's important to step back and look at the whole picture, because you're only dealing with problems if you're in the weeds in your customer support inquiries. That's actually probably one of the first things that I would try to outsource, just for mental health and to be able to focus on the bigger picture of your business, focus on the things that are going to grow your business rather than focusing on the problems. Because if you're answering customer support inquiries, you're only going to be focusing on the problems, because that's all that's coming at you all day. Like the first 6 months, I used to call Jared, I don't know if this is going to work, man. Everything seems like it's going wrong. He's like, well, you're just answering customer support inquiries all day. So yeah, of course you're going to think that everything is going wrong, because in your world it is. So it's important to step back. That's my point.
So I like that you touched on outsourcing customer support. Let's talk about that for a second. We've obviously been talking about different kind of procedures and structures for how to create really great customer support. And then at a certain point, it should be ideal that you outsource that as your business is growing. So how do you recommend creating that transition really well? What kind of aspects of the customer support side of your business need to be really structured in order for that to be a seamless transition?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple with the dropshipping store. First of all, you need to be in there in the beginning. You need to understand the concerns of your customers and be able to put systems in place to prevent those from happening in the future. But for a dropshipping store, it's fairly simple. I mean, there's not that many things that someone can ask about, right? It's like, hey, where's my order? Hey, my tracking status hasn't updated. Hey, I need to change this size for a different one. So there might be 15 to 20 different scenarios that really are coming up. And the rest of that's 98% of the customer service inquiries, right? And then another 2% might be some random things. So what I would do and what I have done is basically figure out what those 15 to 20 things are. It might be less, it might be more, it might be 25 things, and create a simple doc like a Google Doc that basically has the most commonly asked questions and your very best answer to those questions, right? Because whatever you put in there, that's the information that's going to scale. If you hire a virtual assistant or if you hire someone else to manage your customer service, they're basically going to be copy and pasting whatever you put in there, right? So you want that to be a 10 out of 10. You want that to be the best it could possibly be, because that's going to scale. So it might take you, a little bit longer to write a 10 out of 10 reply than a 7 out of 10 reply, but you only have to do it once, right? So that's something where you want to dive into that and put a lot of your effort and energy into it, and then never worry about it again. So a simple doc that has the most commonly asked questions, the responses to those, and then potential follow-ups underneath those. This question gets asked, this is the answer, this is a potential follow-up, this is my answer to the potential follow-up. And you'll eliminate 98% of the things that you need to do for customer service. And then you say, hey, look, follow this exactly. It's really, you already know that's really good. So you can put that sort of on autopilot, right? And then if you get anything that's out of the ordinary or something that isn't answered on this doc, let me know and I'll answer it. And then they can add that to it. And that's kind of how you scale that. Yeah.
And it seems like that doc should be something that even new dropshippers put into place before they scale. Like you said, the inquiries on a dropshipping store are pretty standard. There's not many outrageous inquiries in terms of what customers are asking for. So that might be actually the first step in general, as you can utilize that doc as a solopreneur to also handle customer support way easier and without feeling, that sense of attack we were discussing that happens when you're dealing with negativity every single day.
Right. But I think people do it too early.
Oh, okay.
So I think people sort of put that on autopilot before they're ready to. What I mean by that is they'll just hire a customer service agent or a virtual assistant to do that for them, and they want them to do the whole thing for them. Here's the problem. That person doesn't care as much about your business as you do. You're paying them their hourly rate. They're going to get paid no matter what. If the business goes under, they'll find a new gig. It's no skin off their back, right? So you need to pour as much energy and love into that document as you possibly can, and have that person basically just using the really awesome responses that you created. But you need to be in there dealing with your customers before that happens, before you make that hire. And I think a lot of people try to do it too quickly and have somebody else create the documentation or just handle all of that. And I think that's just like a leak in your boat, right? So like if your business is a boat, right, that is a potential hole that you can plug up before you sail across the Atlantic Ocean, right? Which would be scaling. But if you've got a hole in the boat, you're probably not going to make it. Like you're going to get pissed off, upset customers, and you won't have had those feedback loops to improve and close up the hole before you start to scale.
I love that metaphor. Did you just make that up?
Totally just made it up.
That's a good one, though. You should share that with the team. Cool. So let's switch gears for a second. And I want to talk about something that actually you taught me even in my first couple of months working with Zendrop. And it's about how you organize all of your goals, objectives, and means of operation on a day-to-day basis. You are truly the powerhouse when it comes to Zendrop in terms of operations. And when you're a new dropshipper, or even if you're quite seasoned and you're scaling, there's so many pieces of the business, right? And odds are you have limited resources in terms of people to help you. So when a new dropshipper is coming into some success, or even if they're just starting out, where do you suggest they really put their focus, and how do they best organize all of their objectives so that they're not getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, it's something that I think a lot of people can benefit from, not just a dropshipper, but obviously this is geared towards dropshippers, so we can go with that route. You need some sort of capture tool at first, right? You need some sort of system to organize all the things you have a commitment to, right? So things are coming at you all day long, right? You get emails, texts, phone calls, Slack notifications, you got all this Skype messages, you got all this stuff coming at you. And if you don't have a place to capture it and organize it, you are going to forget 95% of it, right? And then something's going to come out of the blue a week later, and it's a complete surprise, and it is, or takes a real toll on your mental health, to be honest with you. Not only that, but your business is going to suffer massively. So the system that I use is it's called Getting Things Done. It was formulated by this man called David Allen. So if anyone wants to pick up the book, I highly recommend it, called Getting Things Done: The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. That's the book. It's on Amazon. It's like $15. Highly recommend that. That's kind of the system that I use. But really, to sum it up, it's very simple. You need some sort of capture tool, which is, you could be a piece of software on your computer or your iPhone, or even a pen and paper, to write down all the things that come at you, and then have some sort of system to organize that, whether that's once per day at the end of the day, that you can then reflect on and say, what's the next, what do I have to do about this, right? So if you get an email from Zendrop that says something's out of stock, right? What do I do about that? You can't really do anything about it in the middle of your day, most likely, because you have all these other things you have a commitment to. So that has to be captured somewhere so you don't forget about it. And then it needs to be organized and say, okay, what's my next action here? What do I have to do about this to resolve this issue? So I think that a good system that you can rely on, that your brain can rely on, so it's not thinking about 75 things during the day and you can actually focus and get things done, I think is one of the most important productivity tips, because your brain is really bad at storing information. It's great at thinking of ideas and thoughts. Actually, your brain never stops thinking about ideas and thoughts, unfortunately, sometimes.
Unfortunately.
But it's really bad at storing information, like really bad at it. It can remember like 6 things. And you have probably hundreds of commitments, right? Get mom a birthday gift, wish dad a happy Father's Day. It's like, these things need to live somewhere, or they're going to live in your brain and clog up any sort of creativity or productivity that should be happening. So I think, really simply, having something to capture everything, and then something that your brain can rely on to know that it's going to review that thing later today and organize it when not so many things are coming at me, really frees up your brain to be creative and productive.
So in terms of, let's just parallel this to dropshipping. When you were building stores with Jared, how did you prioritize all of the arguably hundreds of things that go into creating a successful e-commerce store?
Yeah, so then that's kind of the second part of it. So, you capture all this stuff, and part of organizing it is saying, okay, what will have the biggest impact? And what will have the biggest impact for the lowest effort? So obviously, if something has low effort and high impact, you're going to want to do that first, right? So that's sort of how I prioritize and rank things, even to this day. I have 5 things sitting in my next actions list of things to do next, and I'm going to do the thing that is going to have the highest impact. And if something shares impact rating, if 2 things are an 8 out of 10, I'm going to do the thing that's going to take the least amount of effort, because it's going to have the same amount of impact. So you only have so much time in the day, right? So you have to think in sort of that framework to get a lot done, I think. So low effort, high impact things should be done first. And then that sort of just inverses as you work your way down the list. So if something is high effort and low impact, I don't know if I ever want to do that. But if I need to do it, eventually it's going to be at the bottom of the list.
I don't think anyone wants to do those things at all.
but thinking about that in that way, it's actually much easier to say. It's clear, like, what you should do next, right? If you're thinking about it in that framework, it's very easy to ignore something or just delete something off the list that's like, oh, that's actually going to have a really low impact and it's going to take a lot of effort. Like, why am I even thinking about doing that? So that really sort of frees your brain up to know that you're working on the right thing, rather than starting to work on something and then thinking, oh, what about those other 7 things I need to do? Should I be doing that? Like, because I can only do one thing at a time, right? Multitasking is not a thing. So if I'm working on one thing, but in the back of my mind thinking about, wait, what about those other 7 things I need to do? Should I be doing any of those before I do this one? This frees your brain up to be able to just focus on that one thing.
I think on the other side of productivity is the concept of stamina, right? We hear, or I've personally heard all the time, having now worked in the e-commerce space for a while, these, internet marketers saying, start a dropshipping store in 1 click. It's the easiest thing in the world. You'll be a millionaire in a week, right? And so there's this false expectation in terms of the amount of work that goes into creating a successful e-commerce store. And I think that tacks on to the fact that we hear, oh, I don't want to do this right now. This is so much work, like so many things I need to do to make sure that I'm successful. And everything just feels redundant and bogs you down from your end goal. And so it seems like this way of organization in terms of productivity and objectives allows you to see, like you just said, things that are low effort, high impact, but also seeing the full picture of how, okay, this indicated correct action is going to give me this much output, and therefore it's worth my time, and I'm not stressed out about doing it.
Yeah, it's also like, what's the simplest way I can do this? I think a lot of people overcomplicate simple things because it feels good to do a big, hard task, right? So it's quite easy to overcomplicate something that's really simple. But if you take a step back and just say, like, what's the easiest way I can achieve this and do that? And it's kind of the, what's that expression? Like, perfect is the enemy of good or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, I could overcomplicate this thing and to get it at a 10, right? And that might be like a 9 out of 10 effort. Or I could give this like a 2 out of 10 effort and get it to like a 7.5. I'm going to go with that option because overcomplicating it isn't going to get me that much more than doing something really simple.
Yeah, and hard work doesn't have to be so grueling too. I've heard the narrative constantly. I've slaved so long to make all this money, or I slaved so long to create whatever business you're trying to create for yourself, when in reality it's working smarter, not harder. And if you can do things with minimal output, but high impact, you are now saving a lot of your energy for what you were just saying, that creativity, that means of seeing the bigger picture and seeing the full picture of your business rather than just those 4 tasks that seem daunting and annoying.
Yeah, don't work harder than you have to.
Don't work harder than you have to. The end. That's where we stop this podcast. I hope everyone got that much information. Don't work harder than you have to. Straight from the COO of Zendrop. Okay, well, I have one last question for you, Brad. And it's more of a reflective question that I want you to just think on. In your time working at Zendrop, what is the largest piece of personal development or personal lesson you've learned that now you take with you every single day?
I think that would be how important mindfulness is. And when with that, some sort of routine that you can fall into. Just being mindfulness, I think, just makes you a better human. It makes you smarter, more compassionate, more kind, more empathetic, and it's just it's just better to be around you if you have self-awareness. It just kind of gives you a bigger perspective and a bigger perspective on the bigger picture of life, and just realize that we're a bunch of humans like spinning around a rock in the middle of the universe, and it's not that big of a deal. So that really helps me kind of deal with all the day-to-day problems. Like, I get so many things coming at me, and it's really easy to get caught up in those and get spun around. So I think for me that's the most impactful thing that I've learned. The team here is really big on mindfulness, and I think that we benefit greatly from it. And then also finding some sort of routine for yourself in the morning, it's really helped me, because if you can own the morning, the rest of your day is pretty easy, and it just feels lighter, feels better. So for me, and it takes a while to kind of curate that for yourself, because not everyone's the same. Jared's ideal morning routine is waking up at 5 in the morning and doing a 45-minute meditation. And if I wake up at 5 in the morning, you don't want to be around me. So it's about curating it to yourself and figuring out what works the best for you. For me, it's somewhere around like a 6:30 wake up. That way I have time to get in like my fairly quick meditation, my morning walk with the dog, my, chug some water and sort of start working early, because as the COO of a startup, you're kind of the emergency room doctor, and things come in like gunshot wound victims come in, and you gotta operate on them right away. So things come at you, and it's kind of difficult to get things done during the day that you have commitments to. So I like to do that in the morning, just so I know whatever comes at me, I got a sufficient amount done that I could get done in the morning. So again, it's what works for you though, right? Like that's what works for me. That might not work for you. It might not work for somebody else. So kind of find your own ideal morning, and I think the rest of your day will be a lot easier.
It's funny you touch on that. We released a YouTube video yesterday, as per inspired, I think, by you. An ideal morning routine in 4 easy steps. And you just touched on all 4 of them. Consistency in terms of a time that works best for you, movement, mindfulness, and water. And if you have all 4 of those things, check, 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 it sets you up for a mental state that doesn't allow you to get bogged down by, like you just said, all the things being thrown at you on a daily basis, both personal and professional.
Yeah, if you take some time out of the day for yourself and get yourself in a high energy state, you're going to be making better decisions. It's if you just if you wake up late, like for me, if I wake up late and I like start scrolling on my phone first thing in the morning, and I don't do all the things I told myself I was going to do, I didn't stay true to myself, like that's a recipe for a bad day for me. It's probably not going to end too well. I'm going to be in a low energy state, and when I'm in a low energy state, my decision making isn't as good. I'm more negative, and it's a lot easier to get bogged down by all the things coming at you that way.
Very true. Very true. Well, Brad, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and taking time out of your busy schedule full of things being thrown at you to give our listeners a little bit of insight in terms of customer support and operations. I think that your knowledge is incredibly valuable, and I'm sure our audience will think the same.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.